Hey there, this video is all about showing you how to load medium format 120 film onto these little reels that you've been loading your 35mm onto. So, first of all, let's go through how a roll of 120 film differs from a roll of 35mm. Before we get into the rest of it, obviously I'm going to be doing all this in the daylight. You're going to be doing this in complete darkness, so obviously transplant that in between all of these shots where I'm absolutely ruining a roll of film. So, when you shoot your roll of 120 film, you'll have a little sticker all around it that's keeping it tight. If you don't put that sticker around your roll of film, it's going to start unspooling and it's going to start basically just exposing itself to light. You'll get light leaks at best and completely lose your images on the roll at worst. The way a roll of 120 is constructed is basically it's got this paper backing that extends for a little while before you get to the actual film, which is just taped on to the backing paper. This basically will keep going on the roll until it reaches the end. And then you've got some more backing on the other side as well. So that means the good thing about 120 is that you don't have to bring in any scissors, you don't have to bring in any of those awkward bottle openers into the darkroom. When you're loading it into the developing tank, you can just disassemble it with your hands, it's nice and easy. The downside is that the actual film backing itself is about the same thickness as 35mm, so some people find it a little bit more difficult with the warping that you'll get. But with practice, you're going to be able to do it just as easily. So onto these reels. First thing you're going to want to do is inspect them like you normally would, make sure everything is in its place, make sure you've got ball bearings on both of them, and also make sure that these two teeth here, these triangular teeth, are aligned. If they're off kilter, just make sure that it's all good. Once you've given your reel a basic inspection and made sure that it's fit for purpose, all you need to do to change one of these reels that is used for 35mm into a reel that's used for 120 is to make sure that these are all aligned, rotate back, and then with a bit of firm but not firm but consistent pressure, keep on rotating till you hear a click, and then you'll see that this moves freely. So it shouldn't be, there you go. So it's not a huge amount of pressure, it's only it's more than you need to actually ratchet things on, but if you feel like nothing is giving, stop and then maybe just try twisting another way. But that's the way to do it. Then once you've got this moving freely, all you need to do is look at these little notches on the side here. You want to be locking the reel back over on this top notch. And again, bit of pressure, click, you'll feel it going over this little ridge here. And once that's done, you've got a reel ready for 120. Again, make sure that this pickup is parallel. You want to make sure that I find it easiest to not actually separate the two halves entirely, because if you realign them incorrectly, you can basically sort of lock yourself out of the spool and it becomes very annoying to fix. So once you've done that, you're ready to go. Make sure that you have that locked in. It's not just going to freely wiggle out, but now you're ready to load your film. So when you're in the darkroom, you'll have your roll of film that has been shot, you've got the sticker around it. So boom, flicking the lights off. The easiest way that I find to do it is just to sort of like run my fingernail underneath this bit of tape here and then just get rid of it. There we go. Now you'll just, by touch, pull this reel of paper away until you start feeling the film itself. The film itself is quite distinct from the paper, so you shouldn't be confused between the two. Now, you just grab your reel, and what you want to do, I find it easiest to just leave the reel on without taking the entire thing off. Your mileage may vary, it's up to you. So grab the tip of this 120 paper, and then feed it as you would with 35mm in between these two uptake slots, past the ball bearings. This is what we're talking about, past the ball bearings, and then again, as with 35, a little bit around the about halfway around the spool. Now we're seeing with this one, because it's quite an old roll, and this is what you'll find sometimes, it does have the tendency to spool up and curl a lot more easily than 35. Being really gentle and slow, being mindful of when things are getting tangled really helps with making that less of a problem. Okay, so now we've come to the end of the roll, and the end of the film is just affixed to the spool with a bit of masking tape. So I just find it easiest to peel off like that. In this case, because it's really old, it's taken off a bit there. Should be okay. You probably won't get that if your film has been made in the last 10 years. This stuff is like 15 years old. So once you've peeled that off, keep ratcheting it on, make sure that it's past this take-up. There we go. And now we're good to load it into the canister. Like with 35mm and all that sort of stuff, don't worry too much about putting your fingers on the film at this stage. Just make sure that you load it correctly. It's more important to make sure that the film isn't contacting or anything like that than it is to avoid touching it. Most of the oils and things from your hands will be washed off during the development process, and really, especially when you're starting out, it's way more important to just get the roll on properly. And again, much like 35mm, always just take your time, back up, load it back on if you need to. You're hearing any clicking or crunching, or anything's not going as smoothly as you'd expect. It should be a nice, smooth process. Just take the reel off, put it back on. Patience is key, really. So when you're loading the film into your canister, it doesn't really change compared to 35mm film. Just get your reel, get your central spool, chuck it in the tank, and make sure you fix your lid properly. This is going to be the same regardless if you're using, these tanks or the Patterson tanks. They all come together pretty much identically. And the handy thing about all of the developing tanks, if you don't know already, is that on the base of them, they just have written the amount of chemistry you need for every roll that you put into here. So for every 35mm roll, you need 290ml of, developer, stop, etc. I usually round that up to 300 because it's too annoying to measure out 290. And then for every roll of 120 or 220 film, you're going to need 500ml of developer. So nice and simple, easy way to remember. It's written on the tank, you're good to go. So now that that's done and loaded, you just have to develop this as you would any 35mm film that you've done before. The most common question that I'm usually asked about 120 versus 35mm in developing is, can they both go in the same tank? Can I mix 35 and 120 together? And yeah, you totally can. The only thing you need to keep in mind is just making sure that they're the same film stock. So if you've shot a roll of HP5 and 120 and then a roll of HP5 and 35mm, you can absolutely put them in the same tank and develop them. Just make sure you probably have a slightly bigger tank than this, so you've got enough space for both rolls to fit. But you will, as long as you can assemble it with all of those reels in there, you're good to go.